Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world where the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, the clang of blacksmiths' hammers, and the distant tolling of church bells. It's medieval Europe, and you're right in the heart of it, surrounded by bustling markets, towering cathedrals, and the ever-present hum of daily life. But there's a shadow creeping in, something dark and unseen, whispering through the crowded streets and over the castle walls. You can almost feel it, can't you? That shiver down your spine, the sense that something's not quite right. And let me tell you, in a time when surviving a toothache was a victory, you probably won't survive what's coming next. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always cool to see where you're tuning in from as we drift off together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in the middle of a bustling medieval town. It's the 14th century, and Europe is alive with activity. The air is filled with the sounds of haggling merchants, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, and the laughter of children playing in the streets. The smell of fresh bread wafts from a nearby bakery, mingling with the earthy scent of livestock and the faint tang of the river that runs through the town. It's a world of contrast where the grandeur of Gothic cathedrals towers over humble thatched cottages and where the lives of peasants and nobles are worlds apart yet intertwined. You glance around and see the social hierarchy at play. At the top are the nobles living in their fortified castles, their days filled with feasts, hunts, and the occasional tournament. Below them are the clergy, the spiritual guides of the time wielding influence through the church's vast power. Then there are the merchants and craftsmen, the backbone of the growing towns, their guilds ensuring quality and fair trade. And at the bottom, the peasants tied to the land, working from dawn to dusk to eke out a living. It's a system that's been in place for centuries, and it seems as solid as the stone walls of the castles that dot the landscape. But beneath the surface, there's a fragility to this world. Disease is a constant companion in medieval Europe. You've seen it yourself: smallpox, dysentery, even the occasional outbreak of leprosy. Medicine is rudimentary at best. Most people rely on herbal remedies, prayers, and the occasional visit from a barber surgeon whose tools look more like instruments of torture than healing. The concept of hygiene is almost non-existent. Streets are open sewers, and clean water is a luxury. It's a time when a simple cut could turn deadly, and childbirth is as dangerous for the mother as it is for the child. Yet life goes on. People adapt, they survive, they even thrive. The population of Europe has been growing steadily, reaching around 75 million souls. Towns are expanding, trade is flourishing, and there's a sense of progress in the air. But progress comes with a price. The very networks that bring prosperity, the trade routes that crisscross the continent, are about to bring something else entirely. You start to hear whispers, faint at first, like the rustle of leaves in a distant forest. Travelers from the East, merchants returning from the Silk Road, speak of a sickness unlike any other. They tell tales of entire villages wiped out of bodies piling up faster than they can be buried. At first, it's easy to dismiss these stories as exaggerations, the kind of tall tales that traders are known for. But as more reports trickle in, a sense of unease begins to spread. You're still standing in that lively marketplace, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The chatter of merchants and the clink of coins still fill the air, but there's a subtle shift you can't quite ignore. A traveler, his cloak dusty from the road, leans against a stall, his voice low as he shares the latest news from the east. You catch fragments words like fever death and black boils. The crowd around him thickens, drawn in by curiosity and a growing dread. You edge closer, straining to hear over the din. Life in medieval Europe has never been easy, and you're used to tales of hardship. But this feels different. The traveler speaks of a pestilence that moves like a storm, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. He describes cities where the living can't keep up with the dead, where the stench of decay clings to the air like a curse. You glance at the faces around you. Some scoff, others cross themselves, but no one walks away. It's as if they're all tethered to the story, unable to escape its pull. And here's where things get a bit strange, even by medieval standards. People start throwing around explanations that sound more like fairy tales than science. You overhear a baker muttering about the four humors, those magical fluids everyone's obsessed with: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. He's convinced this new sickness is just an imbalance, nothing a good bleeding or a bowl of broth can't fix. You can't help but smirk. Modern medicine might be a mess, but at least we've moved past leeches as the cure-all. Still, it's a window into their world where the body is a puzzle to be solved with superstition and guesswork. The whispers don't stop there. As the day wears on, you notice the town's rhythm faltering. A merchant packs up early, muttering about securing his wares before trouble arrives. A priest hurries past his robes, flapping, calling for an extra mass to ward off whatever's coming. You even catch a snippet of debate among the more learned townsfolk. Where did this plague even start? Most point to Central Asia, blaming the trade routes that snake through the continent like veins. But others argue over specifics. Was it the windswept steppes of Mongolia or the crowded markets of China? You'd think with all this chatter, someone would have figured it out by now. But no historians are still squabbling about it centuries later. Here's a fun little aside to chew on Europe's population. That impressive 75 million is about to take a nosedive. You don't know it yet, but nearly a third of those souls, maybe more, won't make it through what's coming. It's a grim thought standing here surrounded by so much life, but it's the scale of this thing that's starting to sink in. This isn't just another bout of fever or a bad harvest. This is something biblical, and it's knocking on your door. Speaking of doors, let's pull you out of the marketplace for a moment and take a wider view. Imagine the trade routes stretching across the continent, a web of commerce that's been Europe's lifeline. Ships dock at ports like Genoa and Venice, unloading silk spices, and now, unwittingly, a deadly stowaway. You picture the rats scurrying off those ships, their tiny fleas carrying a passenger no one can see. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The same paths that brought wealth and wonder are now ferrying doom right into the heart of the towns you love. Back in the streets, the mood is shifting fast. You spot a mother pulling her child away from a group of playing kids, her face tight with worry. A farmer, his cart half empty, grumbles about fewer buyers today. People are starting to hoard what they have. Even the church bells, usually a steady comfort toll with an urgency that sets your teeth on edge. The shadow you felt earlier isn't just creeping, it's spreading, curling around the edges of your world like smoke. But here's the kicker. No one knows how bad it's going to get. Not you. not the nobles in their castles, not even the priests with their prayers. You're all caught in this moment, suspended between the life you've always known and the chaos that's about to erupt. The rumors are growing louder, the fear more palpable, and yet the sun still hangs in the sky, mocking the unease below. So what happens next? How does a world so full of noise and motion fall silent under the weight of this unseen enemy? Stick around because the answers are coming, and trust me, they're not for the faint of heart. For now, you linger in the marketplace, the last rays of sunlight warming your face, the distant horizon darkening with a promise of what's to come. You're back in that bustling marketplace, the one where the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and the chatter of merchants. But now, the sun has dipped below the horizon, and the shadows have deepened. The last rays of light are gone, and with them, the illusion of safety. You can still hear the distant toll of church bells, but their sound is no longer a comfort, it's a warning. The whispers you caught earlier, those fragmented tales of fever and death, are no longer just rumors. They're the first echoes of a storm that's been brewing far beyond the borders of your world, in a place you've only heard of in stories the East. You've always known about the trade routes, those winding paths that stretch across continents, connecting Europe to the fabled lands of Asia. The Silk Road they call Etaname, that conjures images of exotic spices, shimmering fabrics, and treasures beyond imagination. But now, you're starting to realize that these same routes, these lifelines of commerce and culture, are also the perfect conduits for something far less desirable: disease. Let's pull back for a moment, away from the marketplace, and trace the origins of this unseen enemy. The plague didn't just appear out of thin air. It had been simmering for years, maybe even decades, in the vast arid plains of Central Asia. Picture it, a landscape of endless steppes where nomadic tribes roam with their herds and rodents scurry through the grasslands. It's here among these rodent populations that the plague likely began its deadly journey. The bacterium responsible, Yersinia pestis, is a sneaky little thing. It's carried by fleas, which in turn hitch rides on rats, gerbils, and other small mammals. When an infected flea bites a human well, that's when the trouble starts. But where exactly did this all kick off? Historians still argue over the specifics. Some say it was in the bustling markets of China, where trade was booming and people lived in close quarters. Others point to the windswept steppes of Mongolia, where the Mongol Empire was at its height, connecting east and west like never before. It's a bit like trying to pinpoint the exact moment a wildfire starts. By the time you notice the smoke, it's already too late. Speaking of the Mongols, they played a starring role in this grim tale. At the peak of their power, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe, creating a vast network of trade routes that facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and unfortunately, pathogens. Caravans laden with silk spices and precious metals traversed these routes, their camels and horses plodding along, unaware that they were also carrying a deadly cargo. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The same empire that brought the world together also set the stage for one of history's greatest tragedies. But the plague didn't just travel overland. It also took to the seas. Merchant ships, their holds filled with treasures, from the east, sailed from port to port, unwittingly spreading the disease like a viral TikTok trend, unstoppable and everywhere at once. Imagine a ship setting sail from a bustling Asian port, its crew healthy and eager for the journey ahead. But somewhere along the way, A rat scurries aboard, its fur teeming with infected fleas. By the time the ship reaches its destination, the crew is already falling ill, their bodies racked with fever and pain. And that's exactly what happened in 1347 when the plague made its grand entrance into Europe. The port cities of Italy, like Genoa and Venice, were among the first to be hit. These were the gateways to the continent where ships from all over the known world docked to unload their wares. But one fateful day, a ship arrived with a crew that was already dead or dying. The few survivors stumbled ashore, their skin marked with dark swollen lumps, the telltale signs of the bubonic plague. You can almost picture the scene, the harbor, bustling with activity, merchants haggling over prices, dock workers unloading crates. Then the ship pulls in, its sails tattered, its deck eerily quiet. As the first bodies are discovered, panic spreads like wildfire. The authorities, desperate to contain the outbreak, order the ship to be quarantined. But it's too late. The rats have already scampered down the mooring lines, disappearing into the city's alleyways, their tiny passengers ready to wreak havoc. So the plague has landed and the fuse is lit. But how did it spread so fast? Let's zoom out again and look at the bigger picture. Because this wasn't just a one-off disaster, it was a masterclass in unintended consequences. The 14th century world was more connected than you might think, and that connectivity was about to become its Achilles heel. Ready to see how this wildfire jumped from port to port, city to city? Hang on, because the ride's about to get bumpier. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you. The plague bacterium Yersinia pestis is still around today. It's not just a relic of the past. It's a living, breathing organism that continues to infect people, albeit on a much smaller scale. In fact, there are still a few cases reported each year, mostly in rural areas where rodents are common. But don't worry, modern medicine has come a long way since the days of leeches and bloodletting. Antibiotics can usually knock it out before it gets too serious. Still, it's a sobering reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's just lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to resurface. And speaking of shadows, let's not forget the role of climate in this whole mess. Some historians believe that a shift in weather patterns might have played a part in the plague's spread. A series of wet years in Central Asia could have led to an explosion in the rodent population, creating the perfect breeding ground for the disease. It's like nature itself was conspiring against humanity, setting the stage for a catastrophe of biblical proportions. Add in a few hungry fleas and a bustling trade network, and you've got a recipe for disaster that no one saw coming. But let's not get too bogged down in the details. After all, the real story is in the chaos that's about to unfold. Once the plague hit those Italian ports, it didn't just sit there twiddling its microscopic thumbs. It started moving, and it moved fast. The same trade routes that brought wealth and prosperity to Europe now became highways of death, ferrying the disease inland with terrifying efficiency. Take a city like Florence, for instance. It was a thriving hub of art culture and commerce, just a hop skip and a jump from the coast. When the plague arrived, it didn't knock politely. It kicked the door down. Merchants who'd been haggling over silks one day were clutching their rosaries the next, praying for deliverance as their neighbors dropped like flies. The speed of it all was staggering. Within months, entire communities were hollowed out, their streets eerily silent, save for the creak of cartwheels hauling away the dead. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? The devastation is coming, and it's going to be a doozy. But first, let's linger a bit longer on how this thing got its legs. Because the plague didn't just stumble into Europe by accident, it was practically invited in thanks to humanity's own ambition. Want to know how a few fleas turned into a continent-wide nightmare? Let's peel back the layers and find out. Here's another fun fact to chew on. Some researchers think the plague might not have been all rats' fault. Sure, they're the usual suspects with their beady eyes and sneaky paws, but gerbils, yes, gerbils might have been the real culprits in Central Asia. Apparently, these fluffy little critters were just as good at hosting fleas, and their population boomed during those wet years we mentioned. So next time you're at the pet store, maybe give those gerbils a side eye. They've got a dark history. Back to the journey, though. As the plague marched westward, it didn't discriminate. It hit the rich and the poor, the pious and the profane, with equal enthusiasm. By the time it reached the Crimea, a key trading hub on the Black Sea, it was already a juggernaut. There's even a wild story, possibly apocryphal, that the Mongols catapulted plague-ridden corpses over the walls of a besieged city. They're turning biological warfare into a thing centuries before we had a name for it. Whether that's true or not, it's a hell of a visual death raining down from the sky, courtesy of a trebuchet. From Crimea, it was just a short hop across the water to Europe's doorstep. The Genoese traders, ever eager for profit, loaded up their ships and sailed home blissfully, unaware that they were bringing more than just goods back with them. And when those ships docked, the plague didn't waste a second. It leapt ashore, ready to turn the continent into its personal playground. But enough about the Howlets. Get back to the story. The plague has arrived in Europe, and it's not wasting any time. From the port cities, it begins its relentless march inland, following the trade routes that crisscross the continent. It's as if the disease has a map, knowing exactly where to go to inflict the most damage. Towns and villages that were once thriving hubs of activity are now in the crosshairs, their fates sealed by the very networks that once sustained them. You can almost feel the tension building, can't you? The marketplace you were in earlier, with its lively chatter and bustling crowds, is about to become a very different place. The shadow that was creeping in is now fully upon you, and there's no escaping it. But before we dive into the horrors that await, let's take a moment to appreciate the irony of it all. The same human ingenuity that connected the world, that brought prosperity and progress, also paved the way for one of the deadliest pandemics in history. It's a reminder that progress often comes with a price, and sometimes that price is steeper than anyone could have imagined. So, here we are teetering on the edge of chaos. The plague's got its foothold, and it's about to unleash hell. What happens when this invisible enemy starts tearing through Europe's cities and countryside? How do people react when the world they know starts crumbling? Stick around, because the next chapter's coming, and it's going to be a wild ride. You're still standing there, aren't you, frozen in that once bustling marketplace, now a hollow shell of its former self. The plague has sunk its claws into your world, and it's not letting go. The shadow you felt creeping in earlier has grown into a suffocating darkness, spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. You watch in horror as it sweeps across the continent, leaving death in its wake, a relentless tide that drowns everything you once knew. The plague's deadly march. It starts in the ports, those lively hubs of trade where ships unload silks, spices, and now an invisible doom. From Sicily to Genoa, the plague leaps ashore, carried by fleas nestled in the fur of rats that scurry off the docks. You can picture it, a merchant unloading his wares, unaware that death rides alongside his goods. From there, it follows the trade routes, like a hunter stalking prey, snaking inland through muddy roads and crowded towns. It's as if the very arteries of Europe, those paths that once pulsed with life, are now pumping poison. The speed is dizzying. One day, you hear whispers of sickness in a neighboring village. The next, it's at your doorstep. A farmer who shared a pint with you at the tavern last week is now a corpse, his family too weak to bury him. The plague doesn't discriminate. It takes the young, the old, the rich, the poor. You see it in the swollen buboes that erupt on their bodies, black and oozing a grotesque signature of the disease. The air grows heavy with the stench of rot, a smell that clings to your skin and haunts your sleep. It's a nightmare you can't wake from. Fear takes hold. The people around you unravel as quickly as the towns fall. Panic spreads like wildfire, burning through reason and leaving chaos in its ashes. You see it in the abandoned stalls, the empty streets, the way people shrink from one another, as if touch itself is a betrayal. A woman clutches her child, her eyes wild with terror, as if she could shield him from the unseen enemy. A man stumbles past his face wrapped in a rag, muttering about bad air and curses. Everyone's looking for something or someone to blame. The church becomes a battleground of faith and despair. You watch as crowds pack the pews, their prayers rising in a desperate chorus. Some see the plague as God's wrath a punishment for sins they can't even name. Others kneel before altars, offering penance in hopes of mercy. But mercy doesn't come. The priests, overwhelmed, can barely keep up with the dying. You hear of some who refuse to give last rites, fleeing their posts rather than face the risk. Faith, it seems, is a fragile thing when death knocks this loud. Then there are the flagellants, wild-eyed zealots who turn the streets into a theater of blood. You've seen them, haven't you, lashing their backs with whips until the cobblestones run red, their chants a eerie hymn to a god they hope to appease. It's madness dressed as devotion, and you can decide if it's pitiful or terrifying. Either way, it's a stark reminder. Fear can twist even the sanest minds into something unrecognizable. A futile fight. If faith can't stop the plague, surely medicine can right well. Don't hold your breath. The doctors of your time are armed with little more than guesses and a stubborn belief in the four humors. You overhear one insisting that a patient's blood is out of balance and his cure is a blade to the arm. Bloodletting, they call it, a barbaric ritual that leaves the sick weaker than before. You wince at the sight, wondering how anyone thought this was a good idea. Others peddle stranger remedies. You spot a woman clutching a posy of flowers, her face buried in the petals, as if their scent could chase the plague away. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The children sing their innocence a cruel irony. Some swear by astrology, charting the stars for answers, while others smear concoctions of herbs and, yes, even crocodile dunganto the buboes. Crocodile dung. You'd laugh if it weren't so grim. It's a desperate grab at hope, and it's slipping through their fingers. Then come the plague doctors, those eerie figures in their beaked masks and dark robes. You've seen them drifting through the haze, their long staffs tapping the ground like a death knell. The beaks are stuffed with herbs to fend off the miasmathy bad air they blame for the sickness. It's a theory that sounds convincing until you realize it's all wrong. They're more symbol than savior, a haunting reminder that even the learned are powerless here. A world undone. The numbers are staggering. You hear tales of villages emptied overnight, of cities where half the souls are gone. The dead pile up faster than the living can bury the mass. Graves yawn open, swallowing bodies without names or prayers. The fields lie fallow, the market silent. Society itself teeters on the edge, the threads of order fraying with every new victim. You see families split apart, parents abandoning children, siblings turning their backs. Loyalty, duty, honor all crumble under the weight of survival. But there's a twist in this tale, a quirky little footnote to break the gloom. Did you know the plague didn't spare the animals? Dogs and cats dropped dead too. And in some places, people culled them by the hundreds, blaming them for the spread. Here's the kicker: killing the cats let the rats run wild, and those rats carried the fleas that fueled the plague. It's a dark comedy of errors, medieval pest control gone horribly wrong. Speaking of rats, they're the real culprits, aren't they? Scurrying through the shadows, their fleas hopping from host to host. They're the unseen army behind this catastrophe. You can almost hear them now, a faint rustling in the dark, their tiny feet carrying death from house to house. It's a humbling thought, the mightiest kingdoms brought low by something so small. The unanswered questions. How bad was it really? That's where the scholars start bickering. Some say the Black Death took a third of Europe, others argue it was half. You try to wrap your head around it, millions gone, their stories lost to time. The records are a mess, scribbled by trembling hands, or never written at all. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, and the debate rages on. Was it one plague or many? Did it start in Asia, or was it brewing closer to home? The uncertainty only deepens the mystery, pulling you in further. And here's where it gets personal. Amid the collapse, you spot flickers of light, acts of kindness that defy the darkness. A neighbor risks her life to tend the sick. A monk opens his monastery to the dying, his vows outweighing his fear. These moments are rare, but they stick with you, proof that even in hell, humanity clings to itself. What lies ahead? The plague isn't just a killer, it's a sculptor carving new shapes from the ruins. The world you knew is dying, but something else is being born. What happens when half the hands that tilled the fields are gone? When the old rules no longer fit, you're standing on the edge of that change, and it's both thrilling and terrifying. The darkness hasn't lifted yet, but its grip is shifting. Stick with me, because the next chapter's coming, and it's going to turn everything you thought you knew upside down. You're still standing, aren't you? Right there in the thick of it, where the air hangs heavy with the reek of death. The plague has clawed its way into your town, and it's not letting go. The chatter of merchants and the clatter of hooves have faded, replaced by a stillness that's broken only by the occasional wail or the slow groan of a cart piled with bodies. You can't escape the smell, rotting flesh, and despair, a stench that clings to your clothes and burrows into your nightmares. Death isn't just knocking. It's kicked the door down and made itself at home. You've seen the signs, haven't you? The first hints of the plague creeping in like an uninvited guest. It starts innocently enough, a fever, a shiver, maybe a cough you'd brush off on any other day. But then the buboes appear, ugly swollen lumps, black and pulsing, sprouting under the skin, like some grotesque harvest. They bulge in the neck, the armpits, the groin leaking pus, and blood if you're unlucky enough to watch them rupture. You've seen people claw at themselves, their screams, cutting through the silence, their bodies twisting in a dance of agony. It's a sight that lodges in your throat, a bitter reminder that no one's safe, not you, not anyone. The speed of it all is what gets you. One minute your friend is swapping tales over a mug of ale. The next he's gone, his face frozen in a grimace, his body carted off before you can say goodbye. Families vanish overnight, their homes left as hollow shells, their lives snuffed out like candles in a gust. The plague doesn't discriminate. It takes the young, the old, the rich, the poor, leaving you to wonder who's next. The fear is a living thing now coiling around your chest. Every sniffle, every ache sets your heart racing. You catch yourself staring at strangers, searching their faces for the telltale sign-spaller sweat, that haunted look in their eyes. Trust is a luxury you can't afford anymore. It's every soul for themselves. But even in this chaos, people aren't just sitting idle. Oh no, they're fighting back, or at least trying to, with a mix of grit and sheer desperation. Let's talk about the cures. You've seen the physicians at work, haven't you, armed with their leeches and their lancets, convinced that bleeding you dry will fix everything. They call it balancing the humor's blood, phlegm bile. The work's like your body's some kind of stew that's gone off. You watch as they slice into arms, letting crimson spill into bowls, the patient growing paler by the second. Does it help? Not a chance. If anything, it's a fast track to the grave. But they keep at it stubborn as mules. Then there's the oddball stuff. You've heard the rumors, rubbing onions on the sores, tying live chickens to the buboes, like some feathered miracle cure. Picture it, a grown man staggering down the street, a squawking bird strapped to his neck, feathers flying everywhere. It's absurd enough to make you laugh, if only it weren't so tragic. None of it works, of course, but desperation breeds creativity, and people will try anything when hope's in short supply. And those plague doctors, you can't miss them. They sweep through the fog like grim reapers, their beaked masks and dark robes turning heads and stomachs alike. The beaks are packed with herbs meant to fend off the miasma, the bad air they blame for all this. It's a nice theory, except it's dead wrong. The real culprits, Fleesteiny hopping devils riding rats like chariots. But the masks, they're a strange comfort, a symbol that someone somewhere is trying to make sense of the madness. Now here's where the story twists. Because the plague isn't just a disease, it's a reckoning. You've felt the shift in the air, the way people flock to the church like moths to a flame. The pews are packed, the prayers loud and frantic, begging for mercy from a God who seems to have turned his back. The priests thunder from the pulpit, "This is divine wrath, a punishment for your sins. Repent," they say, "and maybe, just maybe, you'll be spared." But as the death toll climbs, faith starts to waver. If God's listening, why isn't he answering? That's when the flagellants show up. You've seen them parading through the streets, haven't you, bare backs, shredded from whips, blood dripping onto the cobblestones, their chants a fevered hymn. They think pain is the key beat yourself raw, and God might forgive the world. It's madness, sure, but it's gripping, a raw display of devotion that leaves you uneasy. Not everyone's buying it, though. Some cling to charms, rabbit feet, dried herbs, vials of murky water, peddled by shady clerics. It's a wild stew of belief, and you can't help but wonder what's holding you together. Here's the bridge to what's next. Faith and medicine might be flailing, but the plague's reach goes deeper still. It's not just bodies dropping, it's the world, cracking apart. Stick around, because the fallout's about to shake things to the core. The ground's shifting under your feet, and it's not just the carts rumbling by. With half the town gone, everything's upended. Fields lie fallow, shops shutter, and the survivors swell. They're not the same. You've noticed the change in the air. Laborers, once dirt poor and powerless, are suddenly in demand. The lords need hands to work the land, and those left standing can name their price. It's a grim kind of power, born from loss, but it's real. The old order's wobbling, and you can feel the tension building. Society's fraying too. You've seen the mass graves, the hurried burials with no time for ceremony. Names fade, stories vanish, and the weight of it hits you, entire lives reduced to nothing. Yet amid the wreckage, something stirring. New ideas, new voices. People aren't just surviving, they're adapting. Art's getting darker songs, sadder, and there's a strange energy brewing. Ever heard Ring Around the Rosie? Some say it's about the plaguerosi rashes, posies to mask the stink, and falling down dead. Probably nonsense, but it's catchy, isn't it? So what's the takeaway? The plague's a monster, no doubt, but it's also a catalyst. It's torn your world apart, sure, but it's laying the groundwork for something new. How do you rebuild from this? What rises from the ashes? Hang on tight, the next chapter's coming. And it's a wild ride. The world around you has unraveled, hasn't it? The plague's grip tightens with each passing day, and the streets, once alive with the hum of daily life, are now eerily silent. The air is thick with fear, a fear so palpable you can almost taste it bitter and metallic on your tongue. You've seen the bodies carted away, the mass graves swallowing entire families, and the desperate, hollow-eyed survivors who wander like ghosts. But even in this suffocating darkness, people aren't ready to surrender. No, they're fighting back, or at least they're trying. The measures they take are as varied as they are desperate, a patchwork of hope, superstition, and sheer willpower. You watch it all unfold, part of you marveling at the ingenuity, another part cringing at the futility. The walls of isolation. It starts with quarantine, a word that rolls off the tongue like a grim incantation. The authorities, those few still clinging to their posts, order the sick to be sealed away. You see entire households barricaded inside their homes, the doors marked with a crude cross in red paint, a warning to all who pass. The word itself, quarantine, comes from the Italian quaranta, meaning 40, the number of days a ship must wait before docking its crew and cargo held in limbo, praying the plague hasn't stowed away with them. But here in your town, quarantine isn't a distant concept. It's a brutal reality. You've heard the cries from behind those marked doors, the pleas for food, for water, for mercy. Sometimes the cries stop, and you know what that means. The silence is worse than the screams. Isolation isn't just for the sick, though. You've seen the healthy flee to the countryside, hoping to outrun the plague's reach. They pack what little they can carry, leaving behind homes, livelihoods, and sometimes loved ones too ill to travel. The roads are choked with these refugees, their faces etched with a mix of hope and dread. But the plague is a cunning hunter. It follows them, slipping into villages and manors alike. You wonder if there's any place left untouched, any sanctuary where the air isn't tainted with death. And yet, the town doesn't stand still. The fight continues, shifting from locked doors to the air itself, as if the very breath you take could be purified or poisoned. The scent of survival. Back in the town, those who remain turn to other defenses. You catch the sharp, acrid scent of burning herbs before you see the smoke curling from doorways and windows. It's a desperate attempt to cleanse the air, to drive out the miasma that's blamed for the sickness. Rosemary, thyme, and juniper are tossed onto fires, their fragrant smoke mingling with the stench of decay. You've even seen people carrying pomanders, those little perforated balls filled with spices, and herbs clutched to their noses as if their lives depend on it. And maybe they do, or so they believe. The streets are a haze of competing smells, the sweet, the bitter, the foul. It's a sensory assault, and you can't help but wonder if it's doing any good. Then there are the masks. You've encountered the plague doctors, haven't you? Those spectral figures in their long coats and beaked masks, their eyes peering out from behind glass lenses. The beaks are stuffed with herbs and flowers, a barrier against the bad air. It's a sight that's both comical and terrifying, like something out of a fever dream. You know the truth thought. These masks are as much for show as for protection. The real enemy isn't the air. It's the fleas, those tiny blood-sucking fiends that leap from rats to humans with impunity. But the doctors don't know that, and so they wander the streets, their staffs tapping a mournful rhythm, their presence a reminder that even the learned are grasping at straws. But the battle doesn't stop at the senses. It digs deeper into the flesh and blood, where desperation takes on a sharper edge. The price of hope. Desperation breeds stranger practices still. You've heard the whispers of bloodletting, that barbaric ritual where the sick are bled to balance the humors. The logic escapes you. How can draining a body already weakened by disease possibly help? Yet the physicians insist, their lancets glinting in the dim light as they slice into veins, letting crimson spill into bowls. You've seen the patients pale and trembling, their eyes pleading for relief that never comes. It's a gruesome theater, and you can't look away. And then there are the leeches. You shudder at the thought, those slimy, wriggling creatures applied to the skin, their mouths latching on to suck the bad blood away. It's a remedy as old as time, but in this context, it feels like a cruel joke. You've watched as the leeches swell and drop off, leaving behind welts and a false sense of hope. The patient might feel a momentary lightness, but it's fleeting a cruel tease before the plague reclaims its hold. But not all measures are so grim. You've seen the absurdities, Tooth Man, who ties a live chicken to his buboes, believing the bird will draw out the poison. The woman who rubs onions on her skin, her eyes streaming with tears, convinced that the sting will ward off the disease. And the children bless them who chant Ring Around the Rosy, their innocent voices a stark contrast to the grim reality. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. A nursery rhyme that's become a prophecy. You can't help but smile at the absurdity even as your heart aches. The absurdity, though, is just a mask for something deeper. Beyond the flesh, the soul itself is under siege, and faith becomes the next battleground. The weight of faith. In the midst of this chaos, faith becomes both a refuge and a weapon. The churches are packed the air thick with incense and the murmur of prayers. You've knelt among them, haven't you? Your hands clasped your lips, moving in silent supplication, begging for deliverance. The priests speak of divine wrath of a God who punishes the wicked and tests the faithful. But as the death toll rises, doubt creeps in. If this is a test, it's one that seems impossible to pass. Some take their faith to the streets. You've seen the flagellants, those wild-eyed zealots who parade through the town, their backs raw and bleeding from the whips they wield. They chant and weep their pain, a public spectacle, a plea for mercy. It's a harrowing sight, and you can decide if it's devotion or madness. Perhaps it's both. Their numbers grow with each passing day, a testament to the desperation that grips the soul when all else fails. But faith isn't the only thing that's tested. The very fabric of society begins to fray. You've noticed the shifts, subtle at first, then glaring. The laborers who survived the plague are suddenly in demand, their wages rising as the lords scramble to keep their fields tended. It's a strange twist of fate. Death has made the living more valuable. You see it in the eyes of the peasants, a glimmer of something new, a sense of power they've never known. The old order is crumbling, and from its ruins, something else is rising. Yet for all these efforts, the enemy remains elusive. The measures multiply, but the truth stays just out of reach until you start to piece it together. the unseen enemy. For all these measures, the plague remains a mystery. You've heard the theories bad air divine punishment, even the alignment of the stars. But none of it makes sense. You've seen the rats, their sleek bodies darting through the shadows, their fleas hopping onto unsuspecting hosts. You suspect they're the true culprits, but who would believe you? It's easier to blame the wrath of God than to face the mundane horror of a disease carried by vermin. And here's a quirky little fact to chew on. The word quarantine might come from the Italian quaranta, but the practice itself has ancient roots. The Bible speaks of isolating lepers, and the Byzantines had their own methods of containment. It's a reminder that humanity has been grappling with disease for as long as we've been around, and yet we're still caught off guard. But enough of that. The plague isn't just a historical footnote. It's a living, breathing nightmare that's reshaping your world. The measures you've seen, quarantine herbs, masks, bloodletting, are all attempts to wrest control from the chaos. Some are rooted in logic, others in superstition, but all are born from the same primal urge to survive. And survive you might. Because even in this abyss, there's a flicker of something brighter pulling you toward the next chapter of this grim tale. A glimmer of hope. Amid the darkness, though there are flickers of light, you've witnessed acts of kindness that defy the fear. Neighbors sharing food with the quarantine monks, tending to the sick, even strangers offering comfort to the dying. These moments are rare, like stars piercing a cloudy sky, but they're there reminding you that humanity isn't entirely lost. And here's where the story turns. The plague, for all its horror, is also a catalyst. It's tearing down the old world, yes, but it's making way for something new. The survivors, those hardy souls who weather the storm, will inherit a changed landscape. The power dynamics are shifting. The social order is in flux, and from the ashes, a different Europe will rise. But that's a tale for another time. For now, you're still in the thick of it, surrounded by the desperate measures of a people fighting for their lives. The air is still heavy with smoke and prayer. The streets still echo with the cries of the afflicted, but you can sense the tide beginning to turn. The worst may be yet to come, or perhaps it's already past. Only time will tell. So what happens next? How does a world ravaged by disease begin to heal? Stick around, because the answers are coming and they're not what you'd expect. Picture this. You're standing in the midst of a village that's more graveyard than home. The plague has swept through, leaving behind a haunting silence where laughter and chatter once filled the air. The fields stretch out before you, untended, and wild, their crops withering under a sun that seems indifferent to the suffering below. It's a scene of utter desolation, but look closer. There's a flicker of something unexpected. The survivors, those who've outlasted the reaper's grasp, are stepping into a world where the rules have changed. The economy you once knew rigid and unyielding is unraveling, and in its place, a chaotic new order is taking shape. The labor shortage power in scarce hands. Before the plague, life was a grind, wasn't it? You toiled under the feudal system, where peasants like you were little more than extensions of the land bound, to it owned by it, ruled by the lords who sat atop the heap. But now, with so many gone, the game has shifted. There aren't enough hands to plow the fields or shear the sheep, and that scarcity has turned you into something rare, something valuable. Wages are climbing higher than you ever dreamed. In some places, they've doubled, even tripled, as lords scramble to keep their estates afloat. You've seen it with your own eyes, a farmhand who once scraped by, now jingling coins in his pocket, a serf negotiating terms like he's a merchant at market. Some are even buying their freedom trading servitude for a patch of land they can call their own. It's a strange, grim kind of empowerment born from the ashes of loss, but it's real, and it's shaking the foundations of everything you've known. The lords aren't taking this lying down, though. Their world is slipping away, and they're fighting tooth and nail to hold on to it. What happens when the powerful push back against a tide they can't control? Let's find out. The lords' last stand. You can feel the tension brewing, can't you? The nobles draped in their fine silks are pacing their halls, their faces twisted with panic. They've slapped wage caps on the books trying to lock pay at pre-plague levels, and they've doubled down on laws that chain you to the land. It's a desperate bid to keep the old ways alive, but it's like trying to dam a river with a handful of straw. The pressure's building, and it's about to burst. In England, that burst comes in 1381 with the Peasants' Revolt. Imagine it, thousands of you armed with little more than pitchforks and rage marching on London. You're led by Wat Tyler, a roofer with a fire in his belly, shouting for an end to serfdom and a slice of the wealth you've bled for. For a fleeting moment, it feels like victory is within reach, until the king's promises turn to dust and Tyler's head ends up on a spike. The revolt is crushed, but the message lingers. The downtrodden are done bowing, the feudal order's cracking, and the cracks are spreading fast. But the upheaval isn't just in the fields. It's rippling out, tangling the threads of trade and commerce in ways that hit you right where you live. What's next? Let's step into the chaos of the markets, trade in tatters. The plague's grip has throttled trade, hasn't it? The roads that once carried carts brimming with goods now lie quiet, choked with weeds. Ships rot in harbors, their crews claimed by the pestilence, and the markets you used to wander are barren, their stalls gathering cobwebs. Supplies are dwindling, and prices are soaring. Bread, once a staple, now costs a king's ransom, and spices are rarer than gold. The merchants who made it through are cashing in, though. With so little to sell, they're naming their price, and you're paying it because what choice do you have? It's supply and demand with a brutal edge, and it's turning survivors into profiteers. Meanwhile, the cities are hollowed out, their streets echoing with the ghosts of the fallen. But wait, there's a shift. As the plague loosens its hold, you see people streaming in from the countryside, drawn by whispers of work in the rebuilding. The urban heartbeat's faint, but it's starting to pulse again, promising a revival that's as gritty as it is hopeful. The cities are stirring, but there's more to this story, some odd twist that'll make you raise an eyebrow. Ready for a breather from the gloom, a dash of the unexpected. Hear us, something to chew on. The plagues turned you into a nation of drinkers. With wells fouled by death waters, a gamble, so you're reaching for beer and wine instead. Picture Eta, tavern crammed with weary faces, tankards clinking in a toast to outlasting the worst. It's a small, strange comfort, but it's keeping you going. And then there's the way death's warped your mind. It's everywhere, isn't it? The bodies, the pyres, the empty homes. It's made you reckless, living like tomorrow's a myth. You're splashing coin on silks feasts, anything to feel alive. It's a wild streak that's pumping money into a battered economy even as it teeters on the edge. It's absurd, it's human, and it's all part of this messy, unraveling world. But this isn't just about survival, it's about what comes after. The ground's shifting under your feet, and the next chapter's looming. What's it mean for the future? The dawn of something new. The plagues left a scar, no doubt about it. The labor shortages have handed you power you never had. The trade collapse has forced cunning and grit, and that devil-may-care attitudes lit a spark in a world gone dark. Feudalism's on its knees, and from the rubble, something's growing ideas, ambitions, a hunger for change. You can sense it. The Renaissance is whispering on the horizon, its roots digging into this broken soil. This is more than an economic shakeup. It's a crack in the dam, and the flood's coming. How does a world rebuilt from ruin reshape everything, your faith, your culture, your place in it? Hang on, because the next part's peeling back layers you didn't even know were there, and it's going to turn this story on its head. You're standing in the middle of a world that's been turned upside down. The plague has swept through your town, leaving behind a trail of death and despair. The once bustling streets are now eerily quiet, save for the occasional wail of a mourner or the creak of a cart carrying away the dead. The air is thick with the stench of decay, a constant reminder of how fragile life really is. But beyond the bodies piling up, something else is stirring, a crisis of faith that's rattling the very bones of your society. The church, that unshakable pillar you've leaned on your whole life, is starting to crack. You've watched priests who once stood tall, preaching God's mercy, shrink in the face of this unrelenting plague. Their prayers echo hollowly through empty pews, their blessings useless as the death toll climbs. You catch yourself wondering, where's God in this mess? Is this some cosmic payback for humanity's sins, or has the divine just checked out entirely? This doubt isn't just sits spreading like the plague itself. You overhear it in hushed tones at the tavern, see it in the skeptical glances at the market. The clergy's failure to stop the disease has people questioning everything they've been taught. It's a risky game. Doubting the church could land you in hot water, maybe even a heretic's pyre. But when the evidence is a graveyard full of unanswered prayers, it's hard not to let those thoughts creep in. And then there are the flagellants, turning desperation into a public spectacle. You've seen them march through the streets, their whips cracking against their own flesh, blood staining the cobblestones. Their chants rise above the groans of the sick, a frantic plea to appease an angry God. It's equal parts horrifying and hypnotic proof that fear can twist faith into something wild and unrecognizable. But this upheaval isn't just about religion. It's bleeding into every corner of your world. The plague's shadow is long, and it's changing how you live, how you think, even how you decorate your walls. Let's take a stroll through this grim, new reality and see what's sprouting from the ashes of your old certainties. Death's not just a visitor anymore. It's moved and set up shop and made itself at home. You can't escape it, not in the streets, not in the churches, and definitely not in the art. Take the Danse Macabre, for instance. You've spotted these eerie paintings popping up everywhere, skeletons grinning as they lead kings, peasants, and priests in a final twisted jig. It's a stark message: death doesn't care about your title or your gold. Everyone's invited to the dance, whether you RSVP or not. Even your trinkets are getting in on the action. Memento, more little reminders that you're not long for this world or all the rage. You've seen skull-engraved rings on merchants' fingers, coffin-shaped pendants dangling from noble women's necks. It's morbid, sure, but there's a strange comfort in it. When death's knocking daily, why not wear it like a badge? And here's a weird one to chew on. That, bless you, you mutter after someone sneezes. Rumor has it that habit kicked off during the plague. A sneeze could mean the Black Death was sizing you up, so a quick blessing was your best shot at dodging the Reaper. It's a flimsy shield against a sneeze-turned death sentence, but in times like these, You'll take any superstition you can get. So you're caught in this whirlwind of doubt and death-obsessed culture. But there's more to it than just gloom. The ground's shifting beneath your feet, and what's coming up next might just change everything. Let's peel back the layers of this rotting world and peek at the seeds starting to sprout. The plague's forcing you to face some hard truths. The church's promises are ringing hollow, and those flagellants aren't exactly inspiring confidence. But in the cracks of this crumbling order, new ideas are sneaking through. You're starting to question not just God, but the whole system. Why should priests hold all the answers? Why not look to yourself, your own mind, for a way forward that shifts, showing up in the strangest places? The arts, darker, yes, but it's also more humanless about heavenly glory, more about the raw, messy reality of life. The memento mori aren't just about death. They're about living with eyes wide open. And that little bless you quirk, it's a sign you're clinging to hope, even if it's wrapped in superstition. Here's the kicker. This chaos is setting the stage for something big. The Renaissance, that dazzling explosion of art science and human potentialists lurking just over the horizon. It's hard to imagine now with the stench of death still in your nose, but the roots are digging in. Every question you ask, every old rule you toss aside, is fertilizer for what's coming, a world where reason might just outshine blind faith. But you're not there yet. For now, you're still wading through the muck, trying to make sense of a society that's lost its footing. The plague's rewritten the rules, and there's no undoing it. What's next? How do you rebuild when the foundations are this shaky? And what wild, unexpected things will grow from this mess? Stick around, because the story's far from over. The answers are coming, and they're going to hit you like a cartload of plague corpses, gruesome, fascinating, and impossible to ignore. You're standing at the edge of a bustling port city, the air thick with the scent of salt and spices. Ships from distant lands creak as they unload their cargo silks from the east, spices from the orient, and treasures from beyond the known world. The docks hum with activity, merchants haggle over prices, sailors shout orders, and the clatter of hooves echoes as carts haul goods inland. This is the lifeblood of medieval Europe, the trade routes that weave the continent into a tapestry of commerce and connection. But as you watch, a shadow begins to creep over this vibrant, seen a shadow carried on the very roads that once promised prosperity. These paths, these veins of wealth, are about to become the highways of death. In this journey, you'll walk the roads that carried the plague across Europe, tracing its deadly path from the east to the heart of the continent. You'll see how the same routes that brought silk and spice also ferried a silent killer, transforming bustling markets into ghost towns and turning thriving cities into tombs. It's not just about the spread, it's about the people caught in its wake, the choices they made, and the eerie silence that followed. And as always, there's a twist or two waiting for you along the way. The lifelines turned lethal. Before the plague, these trade routes were the envy of the world. The Silk Road stretched like a ribbon across Asia, linking Europe to the riches of China and India. Caravans laden with goods traversed deserts and mountains, their camels plodding along paths worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Maritime routes crisscrossed the Mediterranean, connecting ports like Genoa, Venice, and Constantinople in a web of exchange. Overland paths snaked through forests and fields, tying together villages and towns in a network of commerce. It was through these arteries that Europe thrived, its markets brimming with exotic goods and its coffers swelling with coin. But prosperity came with a price. The same roads that carried merchants and their wares also carried travelers, soldiers, and refugees seek a potential bearer of disease. And in 1347, that disease arrived with a vengeance. You can almost picture it, a ship docking in Messina. Its crew, gaunt and feverish, their bodies marked with the telltale buboes. The rats scurry off the ship, their fleas leaping onto unsuspecting hosts. The plague has found its gateway, and from here, it will follow the roads like a hunter stalking its prey. The spread is relentless. From Sicily, it leaps to mainland Italy, then fans out across the continent. You follow its path north to France, east to Germany, west to Spain, and beyond. The trade routes, once symbols of connection, now serve as the perfect conduits for contagion. Merchants unaware of the danger carry the disease from town to town, their goods tainted with an invisible killer. Soldiers marching to and from conflicts spread it through the countryside. Even pilgrims seeking solace in holy sites unknowingly ferry the plague to new destinations. It's a grim irony. The very things that bound Europe together are now tearing it apart. What's it like to be part of this unfolding disaster? The roads don't just carry disease, they carry stories, and you're about to step into the shoes of those who walked them. Let's peel back the layers and meet the people who turn these lifelines into lethal traps, all without realizing the doom they carried. The human element. Unwitting carriers. Picture the merchant from Genoa. He's made the journey to the east countless times, each trip a gamble for profit. He haggles over silks in Constantinople, loads his cart with spices in Alexandria, and sets off for home dreaming of the fortune awaiting him. But this time, something's different. A cough here, a fever there, small signs he brushes off as fatigue. By the time he reaches his destination, he's a walking plague bomb ready to detonate in the heart of his hometown. You can smell the sweat on his brow. Hear the rasp in his voice as he greets his family, unaware that he's brought death to their doorstep. Or take the soldier battle-worn and weary, trudging back from a campaign in the Crimea. He's seen horrors, but nothing like what's coming. As he passes through villages, he shares bread and stories with locals, his rough hands passing more than just crumbs. The fleas on his cloak, the rats in his camp, they're the real victors of this war, and they're about to claim their spoils. You can feel the weight of his armor, the ache in his bones, and the chill of the unseen enemy clinging to him. Then there are the refugees fleeing from one stricken city to another seeking safety, but finding only more death. You watch them stream along the roads, their faces etched with fear, their belongings bundled on their backs. The dust kicks up beneath their feet, the air heavy with their whispered prayers. They're desperate to escape, but the plague is a relentless pursuer, and it's gaining ground with every step they take. It's a human tragedy playing out on a continental scale, and you're right in the middle of it, watching as the roads that once promised opportunity now deliver only despair. These stories paint a grim picture, but there's more to uncover, details that might surprise you. The goods traveling these roads weren't just silk and spice. Some carried strange hopes and even stranger fates. Ready for a detour into the oddities of the plague's journey, a quirky detour, the goods that traveled. Here's a little aside to lighten the mood, because even in the darkest times, there's room for a bit of oddity. Did you know that among the goods traded along these routes were items believed to ward off disease? Take the bezoar stone, a calcified mass found in the stomachs of certain animals. Merchants hawked these as miracle cures, claiming they could neutralize poison and protect against the plague. You can imagine the scene, a frantic buyer clutching a bezoar like a talisman, hoping it would keep the reaper at bay. Spoiler alert, it didn't work, but it's a curious glimpse into the desperation of the time. Or consider the trade in vinegar thought to purify the air and cleanse the body. People doused themselves in it, drank it, even used it to wash their coins. It was the medieval equivalent of hand sanitizer, and about as effective against the plague as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. You can almost taste the sour tang on your tongue. Feel the sting as it splashes across your skin, a futile shield against an unstoppable foe. And let's not forget the rats. While they weren't traded intentionally, they hitched rides on ships and carts, their fleas carrying the plague from port to port. It's a strange twist of fate that these tiny creatures, so often overlooked, played such a pivotal role in history's deadliest pandemic. You might even say they were the ultimate stowaways, sneaking their way into the annals of infamy. These quirks hint at a bigger puzzle. How did the plague move so fast, so far? Scholars still argue over the answers, and you're about to step into their debate. Let's explore the theories and the mysteries that keep the plague's story alive. The scholarly debate. Unraveling the mystery. How did it all happen so quickly? Historians can't agree. Some argue that climate change played a role, a series of wet years in Asia that led to a boom in rodent populations, creating a perfect storm for disease. Others point to the Mongol Empire's expansion, which opened new trade routes and inadvertently paved the way for the plague's journey westward. And then there's the theory that the plague was already simmering in Europe, just waiting for the right conditions to erupt. You can almost hear the academics squabbling. It was the rats. No, it was the gerbils. Wait, what about the fleas? It's a debate that's been raging for centuries. And the truth is, we may never know the full story. But that's part of the allure, isn't it? The plague remains a puzzle, a historical whodunit with clues scattered across continents and centuries. You're left to wonder, was it nature, human ambition, or sheer bad luck that turned these roads into death traps? One thing's certain, the trade routes were the superhighways of their time, and the plague was a hitchhiker with a one-way ticket to devastation. You can't help but marvel at the irony. The very networks that connected the world also served as its undoing. The roads carried the plague, but what happened when it arrived? The aftermath is a haunting tale of silence and survival, and it's coming up next. Are you ready to see what's left when the dust settles? The silence that followed, as the plague sweeps through the roads, begin to empty. Markets that once thrummed with life now stand deserted, their stalls abandoned, their goods left to rot. You walk through a town square that was once a hive of activity, now so quiet you can hear the wind whistling through the empty streets. The silence is deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that preceded it. The air feels heavy, thick, with the stench of decay and the absence of voices. But even in this desolation, there's a glimmer of something else. The survivors, those hardy souls who weathered the storm, are starting to emerge. They're cautious, wary, but they're also resilient. They know that life must go on, even in the face of such overwhelming loss. You see a cart creak back into motion, hear the faint shout of a sailor as a ship sets sail. The pulse of commerce, though faint, begins to beat again. It's a testament to the human spirit. This stubborn refusal to be beaten, but it's also a reminder that the world has changed irrevocably. The plague has left its mark, and the roads that once carried dreams now bear the weight of memory. So what happens next? How does a society rebuild when its very foundations have been shaken? And what desperate measures do people take when faced with such unrelenting horror? You're about to find out. The next section will take you into the heart of the chaos, where fear and ingenuity collide in a desperate bid for survival. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. You're standing in the midst of medieval Europe, where the plague has turned the world upside down. The streets reek of despair, rotting refuse, unwashed bodies, and the sharp tang of fear. But as you squint through the haze, you notice something peculiar. Suffering isn't doled out evenly. The poor are crumbling under the plague's weight, while the wealthy cling to their privileges like lifeboats in a storm. In this section, we'll dig into this grim disparity, from the squalor of the slums to the fleeting safety of noble estates and beyond. Buckle up. There's a twist at the end that'll make you rethink everything. The plague's favorite prey. Picture the poorest quarters of a medieval town. The air is thick, almost chewable, with the stench of sewage and decay. Homesick, you can call them that, are ramshackle huts, crammed together like sardines in a tin. Families huddle inside, sharing space with rats and fleas, the plague's eager messengers. When the disease strikes, it's a massacre. You hear the wails of mothers as children collapse, their skin blooming with dark, ominous sores. Entire households vanish, in days their bodies tossed onto carts, like yesterday's garbage destined for unmarked pits. It's a relentless, suffocating nightmare, and escape isn't an option when you've got nowhere to run. Now shift your gaze to the wealthy. They're not breathing this foul air. They've fled to their countryside manors, where the breeze carries the scent of lavender instead of death. You see them behind tall stone walls, sipping wine while servants fan away the summer heat. They've got money for private doctors who might bleed them with leeches, or prescribe bizarre tonics made from crushed emeralds. It's not foolproof. Plenty of nobles still meet grisly ends, but it buys them time, a luxury the poor can't afford. You might smirk at the irony, all that gold, and they're still bargaining with a disease that doesn't negotiate. But don't get too comfortable up there on your high horse. The plague's got a way of sneaking past even the grandest gates. You've heard whispers of lords and ladies felled in their silk beds, their wealth as useless as a paper shield. It's a dark chuckle from fat nobodies, truly safe, no matter how many coins they've got stashed away. The plague doesn't just decide who lives and who dies, it leaves a mark on how the dead are treated. The chasm between rich and poor widens even in the graveyards. Let's step into this somber scene and see what it reveals about the world you're walking through. Deaths. Double standard. Death comes fast in a plague-ridden town, but what happens next depends on your station. For the poor, it's a grim, no-frills exit. You watch as carts creak through the streets, groaning under the weight of tangled limbs and shrouded faces. These bodies are bound for mass graves, yawning pits, where dozens, sometimes hundreds, are dumped without ceremony. No names, no markers, just a shove into the earth, and a hasty prayer if they're lucky. The smell of lime stings your nose as workers sprinkle it over the piles, a feeble attempt to keep the rot at bay. It's efficient, sure, but it strips away every shred of dignity. The wealthy, though, they get the VIP treatment even in death. You spot a noble's funeral procession, black-clad mourners, a polished coffin, and a priest muttering Latin blessings. They're laid to rest in private plots or beneath church floors, their names carved into stone for posterity. Some even splurge on fancy tombs, complete with statues striking heroic poses. It's almost absurd, this pageantry for the dead, while the poor vanish into oblivion. You can't help but wonder, does a fancier grave make the worms any kinder? Here's a quirky twist to chew on. In some towns, the body count got so high that gravediggers turned into accidental archaeologists. Digging those deep plague pits, they'd unearth older skeletons, long-forgotten souls suddenly crashing the party. Imagine the scene: a jumble of bones from centuries past, mixed with the fresh casualties, like some bizarre medieval reunion. It's a macabre kind of humor, proof that even death can get overcrowded. The plague's uneven toll isn't just a tragedy, it's a spark igniting changes you can feel simmering beneath the surface. The poor are suffering most, but they're not breaking. Let's peek at what's brewing in this fractured society and where it might lead. A society on the brink. The poor have taken the hardest hit, but they're not just fading away. You catch snippets of their defiance, grumbled complaints, in taverns, sharp glances at the nobles' empty townhouses. With so many gone, workers are suddenly in short supply, and the survivors know it. They're starting to demand more, higher wages, better food, a sliver of respect. It's not a full-blown uprising, yet just a murmur, but it's growing louder. You can almost taste the tension, like the air before a storm. The wealthy feel it too, and they're not thrilled. Their fields lie fallow, without hands to work them, their coffers thinning as markets stall. Some cling to power, with white-knuckled fists, hiring guards to keep the rabble in line. Others squint at the horizon, sensing the ground shifting beneath their feet. The plagues rip the veil off society's inequalities, and now everyone's staring at the mess. Will the poor seize this moment, or will the rich slam the door shut? You're right on the edge of finding out. So here you are, ankle deep in a world reshaped by disease and division. The plagues expose the raw truth: suffering isn't fair, and neither is survival. But it's also lit a fuse, one that's crackling toward something big. What happens when the smoke clears? How will this battered society stitch itself back together or tear itself apart? The next section's waiting to pull you into the aftermath, where resilience battles ruin and a few surprises might just turn the tide. Stick around, you're in for a wild ride. You're living in a time when the world feels like it's unraveling. The plague has turned your once familiar streets into a labyrinth of fear and death. But it's not just your body that's under siege, your mind is too. Everywhere you turn, people are grasping for answers, desperate to make sense of the chaos. Some look to the heavens, others to the stars, and a few brave souls dare to question everything they've been taught. In this section, we'll delve into the mysteries of the medieval mind, exploring how the plague tested faith, fueled superstition, and maybe planted the seeds of a new way of thinking. The church's crumbling grip. The church has always been your rock, a steady presence in an uncertain world. But now, even that foundation is shaking. As the death toll climbs, you hear whispers in the pews. Is this God's punishment for our sins? Have we angered him beyond forgiveness? The priests, usually so confident, seem at a loss, their sermons tinged with desperation. You watch as the faithful flock to shrines and relics, hoping for a miracle that never comes. And then there are the flagellant zealots, who take to the streets, whipping themselves bloody in a frenzied bid to atone for humanity's wrongs. It's a spectacle that's equal parts horrifying and mesmerizing, a stark reminder of how fear can twist faith into something unrecognizable. You join a throng of pilgrims, their faces gaunt with hunger and hope as they trek to a distant shrine. The road is lined with makeshift crosses, each one a silent plea for mercy. At night, you huddle around campfires, listening to tales of saints and miracles clinging to the belief that somewhere, somehow, there's a cure for this curse. But as the days pass and the plague follows you like a shadow, that hope begins to fray. The flagellants' chants rise above the groans of the sick, their whips cracking like thunder. You watch as they lash themselves, their backs raw and bleeding, believing each stripe brings them closer to salvation. It's a brutal, mesmerizing display, and you can't help but wonder, is this faith or is it madness? Historians still debate whether the plague weakened the church's hold or strengthened it in some corners. For every soul who turned away disillusioned by unanswered prayers, another doubled down seeking solace in ritual and repentance. It's a question with no easy answer, and one that lingers as you step out of the cathedral's shadow. But prayer isn't the only refuge. Some look to the heavens in a different way, seeking answers not from God, but from the stars themselves. Let's step into the world of superstition, where fear and folklore collide in a desperate bid for control. The stars, the air, and the scapegoats. Not everyone's looking to God for answers. Some turn to the stars, convinced the plague is written in the cosmos. You've heard the astrologers muttering about a rare alignment of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in 1345A. Celestial conspiracy that's poisoned the air and brought this curse upon the land. It's a theory as fantastical as it is unprovable. But in times like these, people cling to anything that offers a shred of explanation. You'd roll your eyes if you weren't so scared, and if the night sky didn't suddenly feel so ominous. Others blame the miasma, that foul, invisible vapor they say carries the disease. You see people walking with posies pressed to their noses, their eyes wide with hope and fear. Ring around, the rosy pocket full of posies, the children sing their innocent voices, a chilling echo of the times. It's a small comfort, but when the air itself feels like a threat, you'll take what you can get. Some even wear masks stuffed with herbs, believing the scent will shield quirky little habit that's as endearing as it is futile. Then there are the darker superstitions, the whispers that certain groups are to blame, that they've poisoned the wells or cast evil spells. You've seen the fear turn to rage, the mobs gathering with torches and pitchforks, ready to purge the guilty. The Jews, the witches, the foreigners, they're all targets, their only crime being different in a world desperate for someone to blame. It's a dark, ugly side of humanity, and it leaves a stain that no amount of blood can wash away. While the masses chase phantoms, the learned men of the time are grappling with their own theories, ones that, for all their flaws, at least attempt to ground the plague in the physical world. Let's peek into the strange, often gruesome world of medieval medicine, the doctor's desperate dance. In the midst of this chaos, the doctors are doing their best, or at least what passes for it in these times. You've seen them cloaked in their long robes and beaked masks, looking more like creatures from a nightmare than healers. They stuff those beaks with herbs, believing it will protect them from the bad air. Their treatments are just as bizarre bloodletting to balance the humor's poultices made from who knows what, and potions that taste like despair. You can't help but wince as you watch a patient endure yet another round of leeches, their skin paling with each suck. It's a brutal, desperate medicine, and deep down, you suspect it's doing more harm than good. You visit a sick friend only to find a doctor hovering over them, a bowl of blood at their side. The air is thick with the metallic tang of iron, and your friend's eyes are glazed with pain and confusion. It's for the best, the doctor mutters, but you're not so sure. Later you hear of other remedies, toad venom, unicorn horn, even the touch of a king. It's a carnival of quackery, and you'd laugh if it weren't so tragic. You'd think with all this bloodletting, they'd have invented a better way to open a vein, maybe a medieval version of a juice box. But no, it's all lancets and leeches, and you're left wondering if anyone's actually getting better. Yet even as the doctors cling to their leeches and lancets, a few dissenting voices are starting to emerge, questioning the old ways and daring to imagine a different path. Let's meet the quiet rebels who dared to think beyond the dogma, the first flickers of reason. Not everyone's content with these answers. You've noticed a few curious minds starting to question the old ways. There's the scholar who pores over ancient texts, searching for patterns in the plague's spread. The anatomist who risks censure to dissect a body hoping to unlock the secrets of disease. And the traveler who speaks of distant lands where the plague behaves differently, suggesting that perhaps it's not divine wrath after all, but something more natural. These are dangerous thoughts, ones that could get you branded a heretic, but they're also tantalizing, a whisper of a future where reason might triumph over fear. There's talk of a scholar in Paris who's compiling reports from across Europe, noting how the plague seems to follow trade routes in crowded cities. He's not calling it science, not yet, but there's a method to his madness, a glimmer of something that might one day be called epidemiology. You listen to his theories with a mix of skepticism and fascination, wondering if this is the future. It's a fragile hope, but in a world drowning in despair, even a flicker can feel like a beacon. Could these quiet questioners be the ones to pull humanity out of the darks? The plague has left its mark on your world, not just in the bodies it claimed, but in the minds it challenged. Faith has been tested, superstitions have flourished, and the first flickers of rational thought have begun to glow. It's a messy, painful transformation, but it's also the beginning of something new. As you look around at the ruins of your old certainties, you can't help but wonder what will rise from these ashes. The answer, as you'll see in the next section, is a haunting blend of beauty and despair, captured in the art and culture of a world forever changed. You're walking through a medieval town, but it's not the bustling hub of merchants and chatter you once knew. The streets lie eerily silent, broken only by the creak of a cart hauling away the latest victims. The air hangs heavy with a sour tang of decay, a scent that clings to your cloak like an unwanted guest. Somewhere church bells toll a slow, mournful rhythm that feels like the heartbeat of a dying world. The plague has sunk its claws into everything, and even the art that used to brighten these gloomy days now wears its shadow like a shroud. Take a look at the walls around you. Well, if any painters are still alive to wield a brush. The dance macabre stares back, a parade of skeletons leading the living to their graves. In one scene, a king stumbles forward, his golden crown tipping off his head as a bony figure yanks at his velvet sleeve. Beside him, a peasant trudges along, too tired to fight his patched tunic flapping in the breeze. Even the priest isn't spared, his hands fumbling with a rosary as a skeletal grin mocks his prayers. These images plaster church walls and spill onto manuscript pages, a constant nudge in your ribs. Death doesn't care who you are. Rich, poor, holy or not, when the dance starts, you're on the list. It's grim, sure, but there's a twisted fairness to it that almost makes you smirk. The plague's reach doesn't stop at paint, and plaster seeps into the stories you hear, whispered in the few safe corners left. Boccaccio's. The Decameron is the hot gossip among those who can still read a collection of tales spun by a band of youths hiding out from the sickness. Picture yourself huddled with them, the fire crackling, as they recount a guy faking his own death to dodge his creditors only to stumble into a mess of hilarious near misses. Another story spins a romance so steamy you forget the world's ending, while a third pits a sharp-witted servant against his bumbling lord. It's a roller coaster of laughs and gasps, proof that even with death banging on the door, people still find a way to crack a smile. But the plague's echo isn't just in words, it's in the melodies drifting through the hollowed-out towns. Step into a cathedral if you dare and let the scene wrap around you. The door groans shut, sealing out the chaos, and the air grows thick with the smoky perfume of incense, myrrh, and frankincense swirling like ghosts. Your feet press against the icy stone floor, the chill creeping up your legs as if the earth itself is mourning. Candles flicker their golden light, playing tricks on the walls, turning carved saints into silent watchers. Then it hits you a Gregorian chant, low and haunting, rising from the shadows. The voices weave a melody so heavy it presses on your chest, a sound that's equal parts beauty and despair. Close your eyes, and for a fleeting second, the world's weight lifts until the notes fade and the plague's reality slinks back in. Funny how this all feels a little familiar, right? Fast forward to our own mess with COVID-19, and you see the same impulse kicking in. Artists churned out sketches of empty streets, built towers from toilet paper rolls. Seriously, what was with that panic buying phase, and even turned sourdough into a canvas of crusty defiance? It's like humanity's default setting. When the going gets tough, the tough get creative. Medieval or modern, we're all just trying to make sense of the madness, one brushstroke or bad loaf at a time. Speaking of medieval quirks, those plague doctors strutting around are a sight to behold. With their beaked masks and glassy eyes, they look like they've escaped a low-budget horror flick. Stuffed with herbs to fend off the bad air, those get-ups were their stab at survivalist high-tech hazmat more feathered desperation. You've got to hand it to them, they tried, even if they ended up as the creepiest thing in a world already brimming with nightmares. And while we're on oddities, here's a gem you might not expect. Flip through some old manuscripts if you can find one that hasn't been used for kindling, and you'll spot tiny sketches of rats and fleas lurking in the margins. It's subtle, almost cheeky, like the artists were slipping in a wink to posterity. Yeah, these little pests did us in. Next time you're dodging a cough in a crowd, imagine those scribbles as a medieval PSA, a quiet shout-out to the critters that turned their lives upside down. These threads of art and oddity weave into something bigger, don't they? They hint at a world wrestling with its own wreckage, and that's where the big questions creep in. Historians still bicker over whether the plague lit the match for the Renaissance or just fanned a fire already smoldering. Did the sheer scale of lost whole towns, wiped out families shattered, force you and your neighbors to rethink everything from faith to the future? Or was the Renaissance bubbling up anyway? The plague just a grim sideshow? It's like debating whether a storm makes the tree grow stronger or just snaps it in half. Either way, the roots were already there, waiting to push through. As you mull over that puzzle, the cathedral's chant fades, and your mind drifts to the chaos beyond these walls. Art might capture the plague's soul, but it's the leader-skings counsels the whole high and mighty crew who have to wrestle it into submission. How do they keep a kingdom from crumbling when the ground's shifting under their feet? Spoiler, it's messy, it's wild, and it's coming up next. Stick around. You won't believe the stunts they pull to keep the crown from rolling into the gutter. Let's linger a bit longer in this abyss, though, because there's more to unpack. Back in that cathedral, the air's not just heavy with incense, it's thick with the weight of what's been lost. You can almost hear the echoes of the congregation that used to fill this place, their voices now silenced by the same force that's turned the town into a ghost story. The dance macabre might be a grim joke, but it's also a mirror reflecting a truth you can't unsee. Life's fragile, and the plague's here to remind you every single day. That truth seeps into the Decameron too, doesn't it? Those storytellers aren't just passing the time, they're clinging to it, spinning tales to keep the darkness at bay. Imagine their laughter bouncing off the walls, a defiant middle finger to the reaper hovering outside. It's not just entertainment, it's survival, a way to carve out a sliver of normal in a world that's anything but. And when you hear that troubadour strumming a mournful tune down the street, it's the same deal notes that say we're still here even if it hurts. So as you stand there, caught between the art and the abyss, you can't help but feel the pull of what's next. The plague's reshaping everything, your town, your songs, your stories, but it's the people at the top who have to figure out how to steer this sinking ship. Kings pacing their halls, councils shouting over each other, all scrambling for a plan that doesn't end in ruin. How do they pull it off or fail spectacularly? That's the tale waiting just around the corner, and trust me, it's a doozy you'll want to hear. You're standing in a cavernous castle hall, but it's eerily quiet, no feasts, no laughter, just the soft rustle of robes and the faint echo of a cough. The air feels heavy, tinged with the distant scent of smoke drifting in from the villages beyond the walls. The king paces before you, his crown glinting faintly in the candlelight, his steps uneven with worry. Outside, the plague tears through the land, a silent thief stealing lives by the hour. Hez the ruler, the one everyone looks to, but right now, his furrowed brow and restless hands tell a different story. He's as stumped as the rest. This is your front row seat to leaders in crisis, where kings, queens, and councils scramble to hold their world together as it unravels. You'll walk through their desperate decisions, their oddball solutions, and the cracks forming in their once iron grip. It's a tale of power stretched thin, laced with a little humor and a lot of chaos. So settle in, let's see how the mighty try to manage the unimaginable. The King's Dilemma. Imagine the king's chambers, now the fire crackling low as he leans over a table strewn with maps and letters. His advisors circle like anxious moths, each one buzzing with a different plan. One thrusts a scroll forward, insisting you quarantine the sick mark, their doors with a red cross, and let them fend for themselves. Another wild-eyed suggests burning the bodies, claiming the smoke will chase the sickness away. Then there's the oddball who leans in close, whispering about a cure, wine laced with gold dust. You can almost hear the king's sigh. Great ill, just dip into my bottomless gold stash for that one. Has drowning in advice, and none of it feels right. This isn't fiction, it's history. Take King Philip VI of France, who in 1348 orders every stray dog and cat slaughtered, thinking they're the culprits. Spoiler, they're not. The real villains, fleas on rats, multiply unchecked without those feline hunters making the plague worse. It's a grim irony, a ruler's rash, call backfiring in slow motion. Meanwhile, others like the Duke of Milan play it smarter. He bolts the city gates shut, keeps the sick locked in, and watches his people survive while chaos reigns elsewhere. You can't help but wonder, what if more had followed his lead? The king's not the only one sweating through this mess. Down in the cities, councils are juggling their own disasters, shouting over each other as the streets empty out. Let's shift your view to their world, where the stakes are just as high and the arguments even louder. Councils in crisis. You're in a cramped city hall. Now the air thick with the tang of burning herbs. Someone's latest bright idea to ward off the miasma. The council members bicker like tired siblings, their voices bouncing off the stone walls. One slams a fist on the table, demanding the gates stay shut tight. Another waves a parchment arguing fresh air's the answer, O pen, everything up. A third, clutching a rosary, mumbles about a grand procession to plead with the heavens. It's a medieval shouting match, and you're stuck in the middle, half amused, half exhausted. They churn out rules anyway, close the markets, ban gatherings, herd the sick into pest houses where the air hums with despair. But enforcing it, that's a dream. With half the guards dead or fled the streets turned lawless. You catch glimpses of shadows darting through the night, folks sneaking out for bread or a whispered goodbye. Fear drives them, and the council's decrees flutter uselessly in the wind. Worse riots, flare-up mobs, torching homes, blaming anyone they can. The council scrambles to keep up, sometimes pointing fingers themselves to save face. It's messy, human, and oh so predictable. The cities are a tangle of panic, but some leaders look beyond the shouting matches to stranger fixes. Let's drift into the shadowy corners, where superstition takes the reign, sits weirder than you'd expect. Superstitious solutions. Picture a royal study, dim with flickering candles and the sharp whiff of incense. The king's hunched over a table, an astrologer at his side, tracing lines on a star chart. "See here, your majesty," the man murmurs, tapping a spot where Saturn and Jupiter collide. "The heavens are angry, that's your plague." The king nods, too tired to argue. It's nonsense, sure, but it's easier to blame the sky than wrestle with the real culprits skittering in the straw. This isn't rare. Leaders everywhere lean on the odd and mystical. Popes order masses waving holy relics like magic wands. Nobles clutch talismans, hoping a saint's knucklebone might do the trick. And here's your quirky tidbit: some towns set up plague stones, big rocks where folks drop vinegar-soaked coins for goods avoiding touch. It's a clunky, soggy version of contactless payment, and you can almost see the merchants tiptoeing around it, half hopeful, half embarrassed. Did it work? Not really, but it's a snapshot of a world grasping at anything that feels like control. Superstitions. A distraction, but the plague's carving deeper grooves. Wounds that might reshape everything. Let's step back and peek at a question scholars still toss around like a hot potato. What did this mess do to the old ways? The decline of feudalism. The death tolls unthinkable, millions gone, fields, empty villages silent. But for those left, it's a strange new leverage. You're a peasant now, and suddenly your hands are gold. Lords need workers, so they grudgingly offer more higher pay, fewer chains. It's a quiet rebellion, born not of swords, but of absence. The feudal ladder wobbles, and the king's advisors mutter about uprisings, about serfs who dare to demand. Here's the debate. Did the plague shove feudalism off a cliff, or was it already teetering? Some historians say the labor shortage cracked it open, paving the way for something freer. Others shrug towns were growing. Trade was shifting. Maybe the plague just sped things up. It's a chicken or egg riddle, and you can feel the weight of it in the air, the old orders creaking, and no one's sure what's next. The ground's shifting, but leaders aren't just sitting idle, they're painting their own story literally. Let's wander into the halls where art becomes their last-ditch shield against the chaos. Art as propaganda. You're back in the castle, gazing at a fresh mural in the chapel. Angels swoop over a golden king, their wings a promise of safety. It's beautiful, sure, but it's also a sales pitch stick. With me, folks, I've got divine backup. The king's betting on it to quiet the grumbling masses. Out in the streets, pamphlets flutter, row sketches of him as a shepherd leading through darkness. Minstrels croon about his bravery, their lutes strumming a fragile hope. Not everyone buys it. Some artists sneak in Jobs' skeletal shadow behind a throne, a ballad that ends on a sour note. It's subtle, risky, and you can't help but smirk at their nerve. Art's a lifeline for the powerful, but it's also a mirror reflecting cracks they'd rather ignore. The plagues humbled them all, king's counsels the lot. They've tried quarantines, stars and paintbrushes, but the world's slipping through their fingers. What's left when the bells stop tolling and the smoke clears? That's where we're headed next. The aftermaths calling full of rubble and rebirth, and trust me, you'll want to see how this shaken world stitches itself back together. You stand in the middle of what used to be a bustling village square. But good luck hearing anything now. The silence hits you like a brick wall. No kids giggling over a game of tag, no merchants shouting about their slightly overpriced turnips, no blacksmiths banging out horseshoes like it's medieval karaoke night. Instead, there's just the wind slinking through the empty streets, whistling a tune no one's around to enjoy. It carries a faint whiff of decay, a not-so-subtle reminder of what's been lost. Abandoned carts groan in the breeze, their wheels caked in mud like they're too tired to roll away. Doors dangle on rusty hinges, creaking open to reveal homes stuck in a creepy time capsule half-eaten bread. On tables, a wooden toy horse tipped over on the floor. It's less village life and more ghost town chic. The world feels hollowed out, and you're pretty sure the only residents left are the echoes. This is the aftermath of the Black Death, and it's not messing around. Picture a scythe-wielding Grim Reaper on a European tour taking out between 30% and 60% of the population, like it's a personal challenge. That's tens of millions of people, poof gone, in just a few years. Wrap your head around that. Every other face you know wiped off the map. Your chatty neighbor who always borrows your shovel vanished. Your cousin who owes you 3 chickens, see ya. The baker who makes those slightly burnt loaves you secretly love. A memory. It's a loss so massive it feels like someone hit delete on half the continent, and now you're left wandering through the glitchy remains. But the wreckage doesn't stop at empty house, sits tearing apart everything you thought you knew about how the world works. Fields stretch out before you, choked with weeds and rotting crops, because there's no one left to swing a sickle. Shops line the streets, their windows, dark shelves gathering dust, faster than your grandma's knitting collection. The economy's on life support trade routes as quiet as this village square. And yet amidst the doom and gloom, something's stirring. With so many hands gone, the survivors suddenly have a bit of leverage. Labor's scarce, and the peasants yep, those muddy folks who usually get the short end of the stick are starting to flex. They're asking for higher wages, better conditions, maybe even a day off, once in a blue moon. The old feudal system, with its fancy lords and rigid rules, is wobbling like a cart with a busted wheel. Some of those lords, sweating over their untended lands, are even tossing out concessions freedom, if you can believe it, just to keep things running. It's chaos, sure, but it's chaos with a silver lining, and you can't help but wonder where it's all heading. Speaking of chaos, let's take a stroll through this mess and see what happens when people lose their grip on reason. With death tolls climbing and panic setting in, folks are desperate for something to blame. anything to make sense of the nightmare. Enter the neighborhood, pets cats slinking through alleys, dogs wagging their tails like nothing's wrong. Someone somewhere decides these furry friends are the plague's VIPs spreading doom with every purr and bark. So naturally you watch in horror as people who once cuddled their pets now grab stick stones and whatever else they can hurl. It's a full-on pet purge Fido, and Fluffy don't stand a chance. Here's the kicker, though killing off the cats might have been the dumbest move yet. Fewer felines mean more rats, and those little scurrying jerks are the real MVPs of this disaster, carting around fleas like it's their job. Spoiler, it kind of is. If they'd just stuck to blaming the weather or something less, alive, maybe the body count wouldn't have spiked so hard. Fear's a funny thing. It turns even the sanest folks into their own worst enemies. Now step back from the pitchforks and let's fast forward a few centuries, because this story's still got some plot twists. You'd think we'd have the Black Death figured out by now, right? Most folks, historians, scientists, the guy who's way too into documentaries point to Yersinia pestis, a nasty little bacterium hitching rides on rat fleas. It's the poster child for medieval pandemics, complete with a catchy name and a rap sheet a mile long. But hold up not, everyone's sold. Some scholars, probably sipping coffee and squinting at old bones, argue it might have been something else entirely. Anthrax, maybe, with its own gruesome charm. Or how about a viral hemorrhagic fever? Because why not throw a curveball? They dig through ancient texts, poke at mass graves, and bicker over DNA samples like it's a medieval whodunit. No one's got a slam dunk answer yet, and honestly, it's kind of fun to watch them duke it out. The Black Death keeps its secrets close, haunting us with questions as stubborn as the ghosts you're tiptoeing around right now. So here you are, ankle deep in this land of ghosts, the weight of it all pressing down like a damp fog. The stillness is suffocating, the shadows long and lonely. It's hard to picture anything but sorrow stretching out forever, empty streets, abandoned lives, a world that's forgotten how to hum. But don't write off humanity just yet. Even in this bleak snapshot, there's a flicker of something stubborn, something alive. The survivors, battered and bruised, aren't done. They'll pick up their shovels, dust off their dreams, and start clawing their way back. Fields will green up again. Shops will creak open, and bit by bit, they'll stitch this shredded tapestry together. It won't be the same, how could it be? The plague's carved its signature into the land, the people, the very air you're breathing. What comes next isn't just survival. It's a reinvention, a messy, hopeful scramble out of the ashes. Curious how they pull it off. Stick around tomorrow night. We'll peek at the world they build after the storm. Imagine a Europe where the air feels too still, too empty. The Black Death has swept through like a grim reaper, with no mercy, leaving behind a landscape of silence where bustling villages once stood. The church bells toll less often now, their echoes bouncing off abandoned homes and untended fields. It's the mid-14th century, and the world you knew, crowded, noisy, predictable, has crumbled. But as the survivors blink into the eerie dawn, something new is stirring. This is no mere pause. It's a reckoning. Welcome to Section 14, where we'll wander through the wreckage of a plague-ravaged society and watch it try to rebuild itself, piece by jagged piece. The quiet collapse picture. Yourself in a town square once alive with merchants haggling and children darting underfoot. Now it's a ghost of itself. The baker's oven sits cold, the blacksmith's hammer lies still, and the only sound is the wind rattling through empty doorways. The plague didn't just take lives, it took order. With nearly half the population gone, the daily rhythm of life has shattered. Farms lie fallow, their crops rotting in the sun, because there's no one left to harvest them. In the cities, trade stalls stand deserted goods, gathering dust as the hands that made them rest in unmarked graves. Law and order, that's a memory too. Bandits roam the roads, bolder now with fewer eyes to watch them. Some villages turn inward, barricading themselves against outsiders, while others simply fade away. It's chaos, but it's a quiet chaos. A world holding its breath, unsure of what comes next. And yet amidst this collapse, the seeds of change are sprouting ready to upend everything you thought you knew about power and survival. The streets may be silent, but they're whispering a story of transformation. Let's follow that whisper into the fields where the real shift is taking root. The labor revolution. Step onto a manor's lands, where the Lord surveys his domain with a furrowed brow. Before the plague, peasants like you were dime a dozen bound to the soil, working from dawn to dusk for scraps. Now you're rare, and that rarity is power. With so many gone, the fields beg for workers, and the lords, those haughty men, in their stone, keeps there forced to bargain. Wages creep up timidly, at first, then boldly. A day's labor that once earned a crust of bread might now fetch a coin or two. You can feel the shift in your bones. For the first time, you're not just a tool, you're a prize. The nobles hate it, of course. They pass laws like England's Statute of Laborers in 1351, trying to chain wages back to the old days. But good luck enforcing that when the sheriff's short-staffed and the peasants know their worth. Some of you even pack up and leave chasing better pay in towns or rival estates. It's a slow rebellion, not with swords, but with footsteps, and it's cracking the feudal system at its seams. Fun fact, in some places, lords started offering perks, better food, a bit of land to keep their workers from bolting. Desperate times indeed. The fields are buzzing with this newfound leverage, but it's not just the countryside feeling the quake. Let's peek into the broader economic ripple where the coins are starting to dance to a different tune, a new economic dawn. Now imagine the bigger picture, a Europe where the wheels of trade are grinding back to life, but they're wobbling. The plague slashed the workforce, yes, but it also slashed demand. Fewer mouths to feed means less need for grain, cloth, or iron. Prices plummet in some places, skyrocket in others, and merchants scratch their heads trying to make sense of it all. But here's the twist with labor so scarce, the survivors. Carpenters, weavers, masons can charge more. The balance tilts ever so slightly away from the wealthy few and toward the working many. Towns begin to hum again, though not like before. Empty houses mean lower rents, drawing in rural folk looking for a fresh start. Guilds, once rigid gatekeepers of craft, loosen their grip as they scramble to replace lost members. And the lords, their coffers are thinning. With fewer tenants to tax and higher wages to pay, some sell off land that ends up in the hands of merchants or ambitious peasants. It's not a revolution yet, but it's a tremor hinting at a future where wealth isn't just inherited, but earned. This economic shuffle is rewriting the rules, and it's shaking the foundations of society itself. Let's climb higher to the towers of power and see how the mighty are faring. The fall of feudalism. You're in a grand hall now, tapestries fraying at the edges as a noble paces before his dwindling court. The Black Death didn't spare the elite, they lost kin too. But it's the loss of control that stings most. Feudalism thrived on a simple deal: peasants work, the landlords protect, and profit. but with labor scarce, and peasants bold that deals unraveling. Some lords cling to the old ways, demanding obedience from a shrinking flock. Others adapt, offering freedom, or better terms to keep their estates afloat. Either way, the iron grip is slipping. Take a quirky detour in Italy. Some nobles turn to art, commissioning grim paintings of death, and decay-think skeletons dancing with kings as if to process the upheaval. Meanwhile, across Europe, the church, once a rock of stability, falters as tithes dry up and priests die off. The social ladder's wobbling, and for the first time, the lowly serf might climb a rung or two. Historians argue over. It still did, the plague, kill feudalism, or just hasten its decline. Whatever the answer, you're living the change, and it's as thrilling as it is terrifying. The old order's cracking, but what's rising in its place? That's the question humming through the air, pulling us toward the next chapter of this tale, a teaser for tomorrow. So here you stand in a Europe reshaped by death and defiance. The plague tore through like a scythe, but it left behind more than ruins. It left possibilities. Towns are stirring, wages are rising, and the once unshakable feudal system is teetering. You've seen the immediate chaos, the economic upheaval, the slow shift in power. But this is just the beginning. The Black Death didn't just break the present, it bent the future. How did these changes ripple into the world of medicine science and beyond? That's a story for our next section, a tale of leeches, stargazing, and secrets unearthed from the ashes. Sleep tight, dear listener, for tomorrow night. We'll uncover how the plague's shadow stretched far beyond the grave. Imagine you're strolling through the streets of Florence in 1355. The faint smell of smoke lingers from the pyres that once roared, a grim reminder of the Black Death's wrath. But there's a new hum in the air. Life is creeping back. You pass a tavern where men argue loudly about the stars and their sway over human fate, their voices rising over clinking mugs. Nearby, a painter captures a bustling market scene, his brush dancing across the canvas. It's a world picking itself up, dusting off the ashes, and you're right there, witnessing the stirrings of something new. This isn't just a story of recovery, it's one of reinvention. The plague didn't just shatter lives, it cracked open the old ways, forcing people to rethink everything from healing to hoping. Let's dive into this strange, hopeful chaos and see how it reshaped the world. A new look at healing survival became an obsession after the plague, and people were desperate to figure out what worked. Enter quarantine, a practical gem born from necessity. You might think of it as a modern trick, but it started here. The Venetians, ever the clever merchants, began holding ships in their harbors for 40 days, 40 giornito, make sure no sneaky disease slipped ashore. Picture yourself on one of those ships, the sun blistering overhead, the tang of salt and tar in your nose rocking gently as you stare at Venice's golden domes just out of reach. It's boring, sure, but it beats the alternative, unleashing another round of death. Not everyone was so sensible, though. Some cures were downright bonkers. Folks chugged arsenic and mercury cocktails thinking poison could outpoison the plague spoiler it didn't. Others pinned their hopes on dried toad amulets or herb-stuffed pouches dangling from their necks. You can almost see it. A farmer swaggering through town, toad necklace, swinging reeking of lavender and false confidence. Most of these fixes were laughable, but they show how frantic people were to dodge the reaper. Yet amid the absurdity, a shift was brewing. People started asking real questions. Why did some live while others dropped? Was it bad air, cursed water, or something unseen? These weren't just idle musings. They were the first stumbles toward science, a spark of curiosity that would one day light up the world. This thirst for answers didn't stay in the healer's hoot. It spilled into the streets, the studios, and the churches. Let's wander through this shifting landscape where art and ambition began to bloom from the ruins. Art, ambition, and a dash of luck. The plague's shadow lingered in the art of the time, but it also lit a fire under it. Gone were the stiff, ghostly saints of old. Now, artists painted life-raw, messy, human life. Step into a dusty studio, the air's thick with a sharp bite of turpentine, and a painter's hunched over his work, capturing a merchant's wife in vivid detail, her silk dress, shimmering, her eyes glinting with mischief. It's not just a picture. It's a celebration of being alive, a middle finger to the death that nearly won. Words got a makeover, too. Take Boccaccio's Decamerona. Cheeky collection of tales spun in the plague's wake. It's all love, scams, and laughs told by a gang of youths holed up in a villa, thumbing their noses at the chaos outside. You can hear their cackles bouncing off the stone walls, a reminder that even when the world's falling apart, humans will find a way to crack a joke. And then there were the social climbers. With half the nobles dead, their fancy titles and lands were up for grabs. A sharp-witted merchant or a scrappy peasant could suddenly strut into the upper crust. Imagine a former plow pusher, now decked in velvet, fumbling through a banquet, his calloused hands a giveaway among the silk gloves. It was a medieval rags-to-riches tale. No lottery ticket required, just a knack for seizing the moment. But while some chased new dreams, others clung to old comforts. The plague didn't just rewrite society, it rattled the soul, and faith was caught in the crossfire. Let's peek into this spiritual tug-of-war, faith on the brink. The church took a beating during the plague, literally and figuratively. Some saw its failure to stop the disaster and walked away shaking their heads. Others ran straight to it, desperate for answers. You're in a cathedral now, the air heavy with incense, the pews packed with wide-eyed faithful. A priest thunders from the pulpit, promising salvation. If you just pray harder, repent louder. Hands clutch rosaries, lips whisper pleasits, a scene of raw, ragged hope. But outside, doubt festers. In a dim tavern corner, you catch snippets of a hushed debate. If God's so good, why'd he let this happen? One man grumbles, slamming his ale down. Maybe it's not him at all. Maybe it's just the world. Another mutters, glancing over his shoulder. It's heresy territory, but it's also a sign of cracks in the old certainties. The plague didn't kill faith. It forced it to bend, to wrestle with questions it couldn't ignore. Scholars still bicker about this today. Did the Black Death kick off the Renaissance, or was it just a push for something already simmering? Some say the sheer scale of loss flipped a switch, making people value life self and reason over blind tradition. Others reckon the seeds were sown earlier, and the plague just watered them. It's a historical chicken and egg puzzle, but either way, the ground was shifting fast. So here you are, standing in a world reborn from ashes. The Black Death was a wrecking ball, no question, but it also cleared the way for something new. Let's linger here a moment, soaking in the echoes of this dark chapter and what it left behind. A world remade. The plague didn't just end, it rippled. Quarantine stuck around art got gutsy, and people started climbing ladders they'd never have touched before. You can feel it in the air, a mix of grit and possibility. It's in the painter's bold strokes, the healer's cautious experiments, the peasant turned lord sipping wine with a grin. The Black Death was a nightmare, but it was also a wake-up call, nudging humanity towards science, creativity, and a stubborn will to keep going. As you drift off tonight, let this story settle in. It's a tale of loss, sure, but also of what comes after, of how even the worst storms can leave behind a clearer sky. Next time, well wind down, slow and soft, reflecting on why these echoes still hum through the ages. For now, rest easy, knowing the world kept turning.